a little bit annoying. My whole computer froze. I wasn't too sure if you guys could hear me, so I just, or I should say the video froze, so I stopped it. I did take this opportunity, you might have noticed in the background though, to move my computer undercover. So, because we're getting a little bit of spit, but not enough to make me go inside at this stage. So let's continue on. What I'll do is I'll blend these two videos together and potentially re-upload it as well. But let's keep rocking live. Hopefully we'll have Kerry jump back on. So where were we? Critical friendship. So be clear on expectations. I've already mentioned that reciprocal critical friendship is best, and learn how to be a critical friend. So as I was mentioning, I'm just giving you a brief overview of what it is. I really recommend that you learn how to do that. Now, in the 90-day challenge and in the Right Now program, actually, no, in the 90-day challenge, you have access to it. In the Right Now program, you don't. I need to fix that. I need to make sure you've got access to that. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to actually upload the critical friendship training into the online resources tonight. So everyone who's in the Right Now program will have access to the critical friendship training. And what I might do as a bonus just for you guys in the Elite 10 is I'll put the link into it for this group so that you guys can watch it. So that'll be a bonus for you. So rock forth on that. All right, beautiful. Because I really do think it's important if you enter into a critical friendship, I think it's very, very important that you know how to be a critical friend, but also know how to receive the feedback. And we're actually going to go into more about feedback tomorrow. For now, though, let's jump on to the final part that I wanted to cover, which is all about drafts and rewrites. So drafts and rewrites, just to give you a bit of clarity of the difference between those two. So a draft is your final, it's your final piece. For example, your first draft is the final piece of your initial writing. So it's not the final draft. Hey, Rachel, how are you? It's the completed first draft. So it's the completed work ready to be adjusted to the next stage, which is the second draft. So the draft is the completed version at that point, whereas the rewrite is actually changing aspects within it. Okay. So it's a bit of a murky line, and so I'm going to give you what I say. I'm going to give you what I use in the Right Now program and how I define it, because I think if you've got it well defined, it's much easier to move forward. So I define it like this: a draft is your changes, editing, reviews, etc., and it's the final one of that section. So I'm just trying to work out how to say this exactly. So your first draft is the first word purge. So your first final draft is the first final writing, the first writing of the complete work. Your second draft is then the complete writing taken into account, say, proofreading and spell check. Your third draft is the complete writing with maybe some editing and some feedback, and then the fourth draft, make more editing, feedback, final, blah, blah, blah. So in regard to rewrites, I look at rewrites being more of changing huge amounts of it. So changing large chunks, changing maybe a whole chapter, or rewriting a whole section because you go, you know what, that doesn't work, and actually changing it all. I recommend avoiding the rewrite, particularly in your first couple of drafts. And the reason is, if you followed the process of the Squirrels program, if you followed the steps, so you've done all of your spine, you've done your construct, you've done your red carpet, you've done your action, then you're into WTF. At that point, right, you shouldn't need to be rewriting anything, because if you've done the process and you've written intuitively, to rewrite at that point, you're really questioning your own intuition, and it kind of goes against the whole point of everything we do in the program. So you might rewrite a little bit, but I actually recommend that you don't. I don't tend to rewrite much at all. I'll do some changing, editing, proofing, so my next draft will be a bit more polished, but I won't do a lot of rewrites. Hey, Kerry, glad to have you back. We froze up, but we're rocking. So in the so my recommendation is do your drafts. If you're rewriting, I would question it. I would stop and I'd question the purpose of doing the rewrite, because quite often a rewrite would be better off done as a follow-on book. How cool is that? Let me say it again. Quite often a rewrite would be better off as a follow-on book, because what happens is we start reading what we've written intuitively and editing it, and we have it happens all the time, and it's not just me, I get this feedback. In the growth that we experience through doing the project and then through reading and editing, there's further growth, and then we think that we need to put that new growth in, but you're better off taking that new growth and making a new book, so that then people can come into this first book, get this experience, and then when they're ready, they can get this other experience that you've just had. They're not ready for that yet. I trust that makes sense. Yeah, no, Kerry, it was on my end. I froze up, so I just closed it down and started again, and I'll kind of piecemeal these together at some point. So rock on, all good. All right, cool. So where are we at? Right, drafts and rewrites. So when you're doing an article, you're probably looking at maybe 3, like realistically, particularly if you're doing the process, if you're doing the Scrawls 7-step methodology and you're going through the process, 3 drafts is plenty. You definitely want to have a minimum of 2 drafts. If you're doing 1 draft and posting from that, you are not putting your best foot forward. You are not allowing yourself to have the learning that you need, and you're also, oh, okay, this is something that intuitively came through, so I'm going to say it, disrespecting your reader. Okay, so minimum 2 drafts. I do recommend 3, particularly with an article. So my first draft, I finished my first draft a bit earlier today, and then I posted up there with my response to yesterday's challenge. So my next step will be to do the next 2 drafts. So I'm going to edit and clean it up twice, and then that next stage will either go to someone to read or professional editor, blah, 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 but I'll get into that. So when you're writing a book, though, you want to do more drafts because there's more, words involved, obviously. So let me just pull back for a second. If it's just, say, Facebook content, still do 2 drafts. And what I mean by that is, just say you write it, don't just write it and hit enter. Write it, like, look away for a bit, like, even if it's just for 10 minutes, and then come back and check it. Because here's the thing, we read what we mean, not what we've written. So you can have a mistake in there and read it 10 times. And I've had some of you guys actually message me and go, hey, you've like done this word twice. And I'm like, oh shit, I did too. I read it 10 times and didn't notice. So we read what we mean, not what we actually write. So really important to get somebody else read it, or to put it away, out of sight, out of mind, and come back to it. So back to books. Books, you obviously want to do more drafts. And to give you a bit of an idea, 7 drafts is pretty average. 7 drafts is pretty much what most people would do. Quite a lot of well-known authors will say that they do, anywhere between 8 to 12 drafts. It's okay. That's cool. If you get to about 16 drafts, you're just stuck in perfectionism, procrastination, and you're going a little crazy. Anything less than 5 drafts, and then it goes back to what we were saying before. You're disrespecting your reader, you're disrespecting yourself, you're not putting your best foot forward, and you're actually disrespecting the content that's come through from you intuitively. Okay, so give it the time and attention it needs. Now, having said that, because of the way the Scrawls methodology and the Right Now program is designed, we do 5 drafts. We actually have it very set out. These are the 5 drafts. These are how you do it. These are your 5 drafts. And the reason is because most people that have to do 8 or 10 drafts, they haven't done the earlier steps. So they're actually thinking while they're writing. We do that first, which minimizes how many additional drafts we need to do, but we still do 5 drafts. So just to give you a bit of a rundown, our first draft is our word purge. The second draft, and Kerry, you'll have all this available to you when you get to WTF as well. Our second draft is a surface cleanup. So it's, you do your spell check, you do your proofing, you do your Grammarly, you run it through wraps, etc. The third draft, we then actually send that off to a critical friend. So the critical friend gets a pretty raw version of it still, because remember, the critical friend is not an editor. They are there to share their feelings about what you've written as a reader. And then the fourth draft is you implementing those changes and also doing your copy edit, which is your changes and adjustments. So while it's away with your critical friend, you've kind of got it out of sight, out of mind for a little while. Then it comes back and you do your cleanup, and you make it, what you want it to be. Then you send it away to a professional editor, ideally, or run through some, we've got a lot of self-editing tips of the trade, etc. on the program. And then you do your final draft. So while it's away with the editor, you'll start doing really cool stuff, like maybe putting images in or whatever and cleaning it up in that way, maybe working on your cover and getting that all looking awesome. At the same time, again, out of sight, out of mind. So it comes back, you implement your changes, then you have your final draft. Now, you may choose to actually do some more drafts, and if that's the case, rock on, but never less than 5, particularly if you're doing a book, okay? Article 3 is great. So yeah, if you're doing the steps of scrolls, 5 is perfect. Draft versus rewrite, I've already covered that. Career writers always draft, and I think this is something that a lot of people forget. I've said it before, but a lot of people think that when they start writing, it's got to end up like this. Oh my God, if you could see my first draft, it was so full of just red lines and crap. And I had a critical friend reader. In the critical friend reader, he pointed out that there was one point where it just jumped really quickly and something was missing. It didn't feel right. And so I actually added in another scene to link that up and to keep the flow. So this is why all these steps are so important, especially when you're doing a book. And this one, ready? This is important. This is gold. I'm about to give you like just mega sparkle gold. Okay, so you ready for this? Never delete anything. Never overwrite your drafts. So at the end of the day, or at the end of once you've done your book, for example, you should have draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, all in separate files. Never delete anything, because you never know when you're going to use it. Even for articles, so at the moment I've got my first draft of my article, and I've already pre-saved another file which is called second draft. I've already done that, so I'm not going to change the first draft. It stays where it is, but on the second one is when I do my proofing and my editing and Grammarly, and so I'll run through all those things. And then when I've done that, then I'll create another file called third draft, and I'll do my final cleanup, and that'll be ready to publish. So same thing with books. Actually, books, I have more than that. I have probably about, not drafts, but have about 20 copies of every single one of my books, because when I go through and I'll edit like a chapter or two, and then I'll save another one, because I'm like, I want that like that, just in case. It's probably going a little bit overboard, but never delete anything, and save every single draft. Never overwrite. Okay, if you're going to remove a scene, make sure you've got it saved somewhere. Or if you're going to remove a chapter or a paragraph, save it somewhere. You never know when it's going to come in handy. That's it. That's all of our content for tonight. So before I tell you about tonight's task, is there any questions at all? Any questions that we've got coming up in regard to this? And I'll go through and do a brief kind of refresh of everything. So pop in any questions. While you do that, I'll do the kind of brief overview refresh. So we looked at proof and editing for self. We looked at the difference between proof and editing. Proof is surface, editing is a little deeper, maybe a little bit structural. Use apps like Grammarly. Make sure you use your spell check, and Hemingway is another really great one. Again, it's a free one. You can use it online. What's it called? ProWriter Aid's another good one, but that one is a paid one, but I do recommend it if you're going to get into writing seriously. Make sure you search any of your common errors. So start taking notice of what you commonly do, like with me, with my out and out. I'm just going to stop. Critical friendship, fantastic. Know what it is, and reciprocate is the best way to have a critical friendship. It's not about editing. It's about sharing how it feels as a reader, and in taking that feedback. Same thing. We'll talk, like I said, about feedback a bit more tomorrow. Drafts and rewrites. If you're doing a book, 7's average, 16's crazy, 5 is fantastic if you're doing the scrolls methodology, or if you've got a process. If you're not doing a process, you want to stick with 7+ realistically. If you're doing an article, 3 is great. 2 is a minimum, even if you're doing just content. Drafts and rewrites. Your draft is your final your final full work at each section after you've implemented feedback, etc. And rewrite is actually changing things around, which will usually happen if you have a professional editor give you some suggestions. Never delete anything, and remember that your first draft is not going to be your final work, and that's a good thing. All right. No questions at this stage. If you have any questions when you're watching the rerun, please pop them in the comments. I feel like it's about to rain really heavy in any moment. So the task tonight is to complete a self-proof. So you've already done your first draft. You've been following the steps, so you've done your first draft. So complete a self-proof and edit, surface edit. You don't need to go too deep, particularly if you're doing something like an article. And then potentially get it to a third draft stage and send that external. So if you're not going to send that external, what I mean by external is a friend or someone to read it that can give you feedback. If you've got a professional editor that's happy to, that's fantastic. That's ideal. But if you're not sending it in external, at least let it sit away for a couple of hours before you come back to it. The longer the better, but we've got 10 days and we're kind of limited on time. So usually I would say put it away for a few days. If you've got a book, put it away for a few weeks if you possibly can. Although we don't do that in the 90-day challenge because we don't have time for that, and that's okay. So that is everything, and I can literally hear the rain coming. So I'm going to go. Have a fantastic night. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Until then, rock forth with awesomeness.